Thank you. Thank you, Lo. Alrighty, let's begin. Let's arrive. And I'm going to invite you to just take a moment and maybe turn your body away from your computer screen. You can turn off your screen if you want to. There's nothing really to look at here. And let's just see if we can turn an inward gaze. Sometimes it helps to close the eyes, but that isn't safe for everybody. That doesn't feel reassuring or comforting to everybody. So sometimes it's helpful to find in yoga we call it a drishti. It's a point that can hold our gaze not too far from us. See if you can find something that has maybe a little bit of beauty. See if you can look in your surroundings at something that you've seen a million times in your space, and you've seen it so often that you don't see it anymore. Isn't that a funny thing? We've become so anesthetized by the general look of things that we forget to actually see the things around us that we've chosen to decorate our surroundings. So just have a look around, have a gaze around, and see what captures your attention. And then in a moment, monitor the breath. There's nothing you need to do with any kind of specificity. Just breathe. Breathe with awareness and intentionality. And if you can use the breath in this glorious body as a place to come home to, as a touchstone, naturally the cadence of the breath, the rhythm of the breath will find some ease, will slow down. And everything about the mind, and maybe even the mood, will find a little more gentility. It might take a minute or two. It might take some deeper breathing to increase the oxygen load and the blood flow of the body. And if you notice that your mind is racing, that your mood is a little bit agitated, go ahead and use this time to breathe deeply. Oxygenate the blood with intentionality. It is the number one positive thing you can do for your parasympathetic nervous system. That part of the nervous system that's all about regulating and calming. For the month of May, this is our last conversation of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. We've had an extraordinary month exploring this solid base upon which we stand to view our life, to be anew in our life. Many of us who are exploring Buddhism understand that the foundation of Buddhism is the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path, and that is true. For me, however, the beauty to this foundation that is absolutely essential is the 4 foundations. The body. What is my body doing on any given moment? My emotionality. Am I swinging from one degree to the next? Am I clinging to emotions and moods that I judge to be positive, and I'm rejecting or running away from moods and emotions I judge to be negative? Is there a way that I can treat both with a degree of neutrality and thus become a peacemaker? The third foundation of mindfulness is my own mind, the biases, the conditioning, the thoughts that I've adopted through generations. My parents, their parents, all of that perspective affects me. It has conditioned my life and my point of view and my thoughts and the way that I confirm my thoughts. And so to question my thoughts, to invite curiosity, is a radical act. And it's a critical one. If we have any hope of living a full, creative, beautiful life. Venerable Chodron up at Sravasti Abbey wrote a book called Don't Believe Everything You Think, as a way of joyfully reminding us that the mind is not always a reliable source. The mind can play tricks, we know this. And yet, when the trick is being played on us, how we go to such lengths to deny. It's tomfoolery. And then, of course, the fourth foundation, which is what we've been exploring this week, which is mental formations, how these thoughts come together into whole stories, narratives. Somebody gives us a side-eye look, and before we know it, we are concocting a whole narrative about how this person is judging us and doesn't like us and can see right through us and knows all of our deepest secrets we've put forth so much effort in hiding and denying. Somebody says something in a funny way and we're off to the races with our stories. And most of the stories have a tendency to be quite negative and harsh. And so to question these mental formations, to be curious about what they are rather than feeding them or reacting to them, is an enormous act of self-regard and kindness and love. To be able to say, hey, whoa, wait a second, what am I telling myself? And look at how this story is affecting my mood. Look at how agitated my thoughts are and how tight I am and how sour my belly feels all of a sudden. And if we can just take a moment to sit back and go, wait a minute, would you look at this? What's going on here? Is this even true? And if it is true, let's play it is. That is true. What else is true? Because even when something is true, friends, we have learned over and over again in this community that it rarely reflects, if ever, the whole truth. Yesterday, I brought forward a story about being on the receiving end of some affectionate and caring criticism from a trusted Kalyana Mitra, a wise friend. And it was very easy to receive this feedback and to learn from it. But I brought forward also the example of being on the receiving end of some feedback, some criticism, but the way in which the message was conveyed, it was accusatory, negative, full of judgment and reproach, much more difficult to hold. And so today, I want to share with you a story. Many of you may have already heard this, but it was something that happened to me. This is sort of the beginning of this awareness for me and the teaching of this is true and not the whole truth. And I was in my 20s, and I was studying the work of Thich Nhat Hanh. And I was really trying to understand how to hold things that I don't like along with things that I do, just to hold duality and see if I could discover something new, something else. And at that time, I was also working in a community of people who were both deaf and blind. So these are individuals who live in a highly sensory deprived world. And I had the very good fortune and privilege of being a sign language interpreter and a volunteer to this community. Me, an able-bodied white woman of some means, sighted, hearing, educated. In so many ways, I embodied so many things some of these individuals just did not have. So you can imagine that I encountered jealousy and envy and resentment. But I was a new practitioner. And it came to my attention that a rumor had gone round in this very small community. It's a very tight and intimate community, that I was a snob. That Julia Hayes, watch out for her. She's a snob. I can laugh about it now. But at the time, it was really painful. I'm like, what? Me? A snob? And just what all that meant, and I was looking at that judgment, and then the way I judged people who I thought were snobs and how I wasn't like them. I'm me. So I took that feedback in, and it hurt my feelings. And given the perception of this other person, if I were to be in their shoes, I could see that. I could see how, in some light, that could be true. And while the tone and the accusation of this message was unkind, and I think the motivation and the intention of this particular message by this particular individual was also unkind, it afforded me, however, a real opportunity to look deeply at myself. And I noticed that I was getting defensive, and I was blaming this person for being mean-spirited and uptight and jealous. And that led me to realize, oh wow, when I'm blaming, I'm being defensive. So what am I defending? I'm defending the judgment. I'm defending my own perceptions and mental formations of people I consider snobs and how I'm not like them. I'm defending my whole activity of othering, me versus other people. I'm also defending an image of myself that may be false. This goody two-shoes, this do-gooder, this person that is trying to be spiritual, that I can transcend all actions of snobbery. I was defending that. So a lot of what this message had to say to me was true. And it hurt to look at. It was a spoon, a really good spoon that got to the bottom of my cauldron, stirring some deep, stuck stuff up. And I decided, rather than blame the spoon for stirring up all this stuff, I'm going to put the spoon down. It did its job. Thank you. And now I get to look at my stew stuff, all the junk, all the muck being stirred to the surface, all of what I just described that I was heavily defending. And I was able to say to myself, Julia, you are a snob. That is true. And not the whole truth, because this person is trying to make this label the whole of me. And it isn't. It's a piece of me. It's not a piece that I admire. It's not a piece that I find particularly noble. It is a piece, however, that I can amend. And I can use to try to grow and enrich something else. And so it was a very important piece to come to my awareness. But it was not the whole truth of me. And I share this with you because part of working with our mental formations and our stories and our perception is that when we encounter people in our lives who are accusing, you're so selfish. You know, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But it's said in such a way that it is diminishing. It is all of the worst aspects and behaviors associated with that particular afflicted mind. And while it may be true, it is not the whole truth defining anyone. So while we are invited in this exploration to not blame the spoon, not blame those who are going to stir up our stuff, we also don't want to pretend that those doing the stirring are of little consequence. They don't matter. I don't have to take it personally. That is called spiritual bypassing. And it is a nonsensical way of working with our mental formations, because the reality is that when people say accusatory things, when people have intentions and motivations to harm, it hurts. We don't have to pretend it doesn't. It does. That's real. What we do with that hurt, that's the interesting question. Do I blame? Do I hide? Do I react to the hurt by projecting more hurt or similar aggression? Or do I use that hurt and create a healthy boundary that says, what you just said to me is true. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. The manner in which you said it hurt my feelings. And now I have to create a boundary, because now I don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with you. I don't trust your capacity to hold my feelings. That's a boundary. And that's a very important thing to honor, because it keeps us in integrity. And it also keeps the person on the other side. When we are boundaried with one another, we create the conditions where other people can no longer harm us. We are helping, in some ways, we are supporting the conditions of reducing that activity of harm. But we can't do it if we don't have healthy boundaries. And this is where the balaklohe, the idea of a low-lying wall, stone wall, dividing and separating each other, is such a beautiful boundary image. Because I can go to a stone wall and I can say to the person on the other side of the wall, hey, you know what? You just threw this piece of information over into my space. I'm going to pick it up. And it's true. What you just said is true. But you didn't have to throw it at me. trying to hit me. That was unkind. So I'm going to put that on the wall and leave it there. And I'm going to think about what you said, but I'm not going to have a conversation with you about it. Powerful boundary. Keeps me safe and in integrity, and it keeps the other person looking at the perspective that they just hurled and is now on a neutral space called a boundary. This is how we can work with mental formations, stories, perceptions. And it is a practice. And my hope for you is that you take this information, you take this imagery and these ideas, and you enjoy the practice. It isn't so much about getting it right. It's about getting it right, getting it wrong, getting it meh, and still practicing. But always, I will say, it helps to gather into community, into Sangha of people devoted and dedicated to practice. People like you who have prioritized time to keep an inward gaze, an open heart, and a sound mind. This is the fertile, fertile place of peace, and I am so grateful for it. Thank you, friends. I invite you all to just take a couple of deep breaths. And then let's regroup and come back together and have a conversation. All righty. And I think one of the things that's really powerful, and we'll blend this into our dedication of merit, is just look at our political landscape in the United States of America and look at what's dividing us. Because it certainly isn't human beings by nature of being human. It's our thoughts and perceptions of the world that are creating these great divides. And so here we are endeavoring to do what only we can do, which is to examine our own minds and our own thoughts and to understand them well enough that we do not have to respond with hostility and aggression. We can become these resilient, anchored sources of understanding and wisdom and boundaries and peace and love. I can think of no better way to live this precious life. And I thank you for joining me on this sacred journey of recovering our whole selves. Namaste, friends.